They had lost their operative basis and became almost entirely moral and speculative, and a little later we find the Rosicrucians uniting with them by means of the secret hidden doctrine and belief in the higher initiation which both societies held in common. P.D. Randolph tells us that there are records of Rosicrucians being admitted into Masonic lodges up to 1665, but that after that the Masonic doors were closed a while to them because of some impostors who had crept in. He also claims that other authentic statements show the Rosicrucians to have again been welcomed in the Masonic lodges in 1745. Thus we see the two orders mingled, separated, and mingled again, while at the same time the Rosicrucians and Freemasons were not identical. The spirit of the orders was very similar, but the societies differed in many particulars. Like various other secret fraternities in the Dark Ages, they had only moved forward side by side, sometimes touching each other, sometimes wide apart. Mackey and many Masonic writers deny that the lines ever touched, but in the face of the Rosy Cross degree so similar in both societies, this seems too strong an assertion. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, is that the highest levels of the pyramidal structure of degrees, they are all the same order. The Rosicrucian order, established in England in 1840, was completely changed from the first true Rosicrucian body. This later society is of purely Masonic form, having lodges, initiations, and ceremonies that are entirely lacking in the former Fraternity of the Holy Cross. Likewise, the three so-called Rosicrucian branches in America have no connection with the ancient order of that name. And here he either shows an attempt at intentional deceit or pure ignorance, and if he is ignorant, he should not even be writing on the subject of the Rosicrucians, because it was never the Fraternity of the Holy Cross, never in its entire history. It has always been the Fraternitas Rosae Cruciae, which is the Fraternity of the Rose Cross. And I continue again. The early Rosicrucians had no ceremonials and formal initiations. They claimed that the kinship of spirit needed no grip nor sign nor symbol to make its existence known to one of like mind. The society also admitted women to a membership on equal terms of respect. Therefore, the difference between Freemasons and Rosicrucians is clearly to be seen, although the mainspring of the great secret doctrine brought both into being. Martin Luther, ladies and gentlemen, was a member of the Rose Cross. In fact, his seal was the rose and cross. If you'll study the old documents that still exist that he signed and sealed, you will see it clearly imprinted onto the document. Considering the builders' signs and symbols of the Freemasons, and discovering that the Masons and priests were linked together in early ages, we feel that the great brotherhood developed through Masonic channels. For surely it would have been an act of stupidity on the part of men seeking truth and soul knowledge to encumber themselves with the builder's insignia if the signs of a trade were not their legitimate inheritance. Also, the Templar degrees of the rite of strict observance would have been pointless had there been no connection with the Knights Templars, while lastly, they could have had no claim to the degree of the Rosy Cross had they not mingled with the Rosicrucians. Undoubtedly, these men of lofty intellects would never have stooped to what would have been meaningless and absurd, so we may conclude that the signs, the symbols, the rites, and the ceremonials of the Freemasons are but as growths on the brink of the mighty Masonic stream as it followed its underground course through the Dark Ages. Each has its root in some old truth concerning the deity, nature, or man, or else represents some channel through which the river of light has moved with a steady, resistless flow towards that grand soul knowledge and the brotherhood of man. Emerson says, to every one that reaches toward the light, God has a select family of sons scattered through the earth, who are thy spiritual kindred, and each one, by constant device to the inward law, is weaving sublime proportion of a true I'm trying to decipher these words that are going off the page, ladies and gentlemen, if you're wondering what's happening. Of a true monarch in soul, the mighty currents of the secret doctrine come from the dimmest recesses of the past and bear these able seeking souls on their feet, silently moving waters nearer, nearer to the perfect light. And that is the end of that tone. Also from the same issue. Even the mystics of the Middle Ages, when explaining the mystery of the fish symbol, adopted the loose, or Jack, because in a mystic sense, I and B are complementary, and Jack becomes Iak, or Back, Iacus, or Bacchus, an explanation that should interest Masons and Christians also, for the fish was emblematic of light to the early fathers, many of whom never laid aside their philosopher's robes upon adopting the new faith, for they saw nothing new in it beyond its divinely prepared ritual for the common use of all men. The fleur-de-lis of France is the flower of light of the ancients, even to its very form, which is Chaldean. It is the sacred lotus of Egypt and India, the emblem of the Trinity. Take down your dictionary and consider such words as the following. Luscus, Latin from the Greek, partly blind. Lustro, to make light. Lustrate, to purify, to offer purifactory sacrifice. Lucubrate, to study by light. Lumen, luna, from lucina, the moon. Lucid, to make clear or light, illustrate, illuminate. Luxury. The ramifications of these words is well nigh innumerable. The Latin word lumen, or luna, alone is the root of many coined words in which light is involved, such as the word for lamp. The apparently haphazard selection of examples given should demonstrate the remarkable ancestry and kinship of the Masonic hail. Without further citation, but lest we may lose sight of that which we hail or conceal, let us lucubrate a bit over the philosophy of light as known to the ancients. Deity was conceived to be omnipresent. In the smallest as well as in the greatest of creation, his spirit or divine fire, force, or whatever it may be called, filled the receptacle to the brim. The entire universe was thought to be immersed in the divine essence, as it were, much as we are immersed in the ether. This conception of God was called Brahm by the Hindus and Abram by the Arabians. The Hindu priests were called Brahmins, or priests of Brahm. The Latin priests were called Flamens, deriving the term from the same source as lumen, probably. Flamen and Brahmin are identical terms and cognate. Even in symbolism we find lion, the symbol of strength, traced through Latin and Greek Leo to Hebrew, Egyptian, and Coptic sources, called by the name Hor, or Har, light in Egypt, because it was the symbol of that god, the symbol of the sun, Ra, or hour. If now we consider why priests were called Brahmins in Egypt, we find that Brahm was born from the same brilliant egg of gold that Phra, or Ptah, the Egyptian creator, emerged from. Phre, or Phra, was the creator who emerged from the egg laid by the serpent Neph, American Maya Can, K-A-N, and was colored blue, being girded around the middle to represent the heavens and the earth. This legend, well known to Masonic students, depicts the creation of man himself from his embryonic stage in the human egg until he has passed through the evolutionary stages of insect, reptile, and the like to that of the human being who emerges from the waters and breaks the shell. Wherever we turn in the realms of mythology, etymology, religion, or mystery, we will meet with this same injunction, know thyself. The ancient mysteries as well as the modern were designed with that purpose in view. To bring the candidate to light in the temple of light was to elevate him to the plane of El. And if you've studied the Bible, you should know who El is, shouldn't you? So their goal is to become God, as I have always told you. Look within your heart, ladies and gentlemen. Ask yourself, are you God? Are you ever going to be God? I'm going to tell you right now, the best you could ever hope to do is to lead a good life and help other people and try to make the world better for those who follow. If you really think that you're God, make me a universe, one better than this one without pain and suffering and wars, one without bigots and liars, one without conspirers and complainers and loafers and welchers. Make me that universe and show it to me. And then and only then will I believe that you are God or can ever become God. I remember watching on television Shirley MacLaine spinning around on the beach with her arms in the air declaring, "I am God! I am God! I am God!" She was younger then, didn't have so many lines in her face, wasn't facing the pain in her joints and the mysterious little twinges and quirks of old age, and her hair wasn't falling out then. I wonder, ladies and gentlemen, what she's going to say tomorrow morning when she gets out of bed and makes her way to the bathroom and looks in the mirror. I wonder, will she once again stand up on her toes and twirl around and proclaim, "I am God! I am God! I am God!" And surely, if you're listening, I mean nothing personal, but you see, so many people watch you and you are a celebrity, and they tend to foolishly believe what you so foolishly attempted to teach them. I only mean you well. I only mean everyone well, and that's why I do this nightly. So that we can come together in reality, peacefully, as true brothers and sisters, out in the open, in the light of day, not in the dark light of a lodge behind closed doors with no windows, with phony incantations and circumambulations around some altar, obeying the master who sits in the chair in the east. No, I want a world of real light, sunlight, and truth, and real brotherhood, free from the lies and deceptions and manipulations of those arrogant men who have fallen into the deception of their own conceit and believe that they are the masters of the rest of us. Good night, ladies and gentlemen, and God bless each and every single one of you. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, there's only one thing, one uniting common bond amongst all humanity, and that is to try to understand your neighbor, to live in freedom and give your neighbor the same freedom you expect for yourself. You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you have pen and paper by your side. Tonight we're going to take another journey into the dark recesses of the lost light, if you can imagine such a thing. And I've already tipped my hand a little bit on tonight's broadcast, but I did not give it away. You'll recognize some of the beginning of this. So make sure that you're comfortable. Make sure that your mind is open. Make sure that you're ready to listen with a clear intellect. If you're not, you might as well go play kick the can. out in the street with the local children, because without the things that I've just told you to prepare yourself with, that's about as much good as it's going to do you. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, this is the age of deception, and we have been deceived and manipulated and lied to since the beginning of the dawn of human history by those who have slowly but surely over the years discovered how to do it, how to form their secret organizations to teach their followers how to do it, and they have been controlling the destiny of the human race ever since. They have been in charge, behind the scenes, but nevertheless in charge. For those of you who really think that Bill Clinton is the one making all the decisions and calling the shots, well, I think you better think again. Those who put him there are the ones who are doing all of those things. Bill Clinton is just the one who will take either the wrath or the approval of the public, depending upon how they take what is being done. And everybody wants to impeach Bill Clinton, and I've got to ask you this, folks. What for? Why do you want to impeach Bill Clinton? He's just a figurehead. It's the people behind the throne that we should be going after, because once they are dealt with in a lawful manner, there will be no more Bill Clintons. There can be no more Bill Clintons if these people are put in prison where they belong. For they are treasonous little scoundrels, I can tell you that for sure. If you impeach Bill Clinton, who becomes president? Why, it's Al Gore. And if you impeach Al Gore, who becomes president then? Get out your constitutions, folks, and figure it out. You won't like that one either. And if you do, you're not playing with a full deck. You're going to lose this hand of poker. Stand by. Get ready. Get ready to shine the spotlight on the cockroaches hovering way back there in the dark behind the refrigerator. It's midnight, ladies and gentlemen. A ponderous bell in the church steeple slowly struck 12. You've heard this before, haven't you? Not too long ago, but you only heard a little bit of this. So settle back and get ready to be illumined. In the large auditorium of the sacred edifice, a crowd of people had assembled to witness the last obsequies of a Titan. The angel of death brooded over the scene with shadowy wings. In the center of the room stood a catafalque draped in black, and resting upon it was a casket containing the mortal remains of a great soul. Arranged in triangles about the east, west, and south sides of the catafalque were burning tapers in tall candlesticks of silver. A huge iron cross was set at the head of this catafalque. Nearby stood a table covered with black velvet, upon which were 7 large candlesticks, but without the lights, a silver cup filled with salt, and a skull crowned with a laurel wreath. The gloom of the apartment was intensified by being hung with black cloth. The lights of the wax tapers illumined the face of the dead man, likewise the mocking skull wreathed with laurel, and brought into bold relief the iron cross. At the last stroke of the bell, an organ softly played a miserere, and there marched into the room from out of the Egyptian darkness a long file of men in somber uniforms, bearing lighted candles in their hands. They took their places about the catafalque, the venerable master at the head near the Passion Cross. A trumpet sounded in the distance, and the services began. The venerable master struck with a sledge 3 times upon the iron cross, and challenged anyone to present a charge against the dead man. There was no response, and the trial ended with the declaration that not man, but God only, is capable of judging the dead. Upon the remains were a chaplet of laurel, vines, and berries, representing living joy, a glittering cross representing glory and splendor, and a bunch of violets as a token of grief. All but the violets were removed, as it was declared the dead knight had passed beyond and above earthly pleasures, vainglory, and sorrows. The cords about the hands of the adept were untied, and those about the feet, symbolical of the release of the soul from the enslavement of the body. After a number of other significant offices were performed, the knights all knelt. The venerable master invoked the blessing upon the dead. The lights were extinguished one by one as the knights withdrew silently from the apartment. All Scottish Rite Masons will recognize in the description the funeral services of the 30th degree, the Knight of Cadash, which for weirdness and impressiveness is unsurpassed. The splendid degree of the Cadash portrays the trials and sufferings of Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master of the Knights Templars, who fell a victim to the machination of Philippe le Bel of France and Pope Clement V. De Molay and his fellows perished in the flames of the Inquisition. The Order of Knights Templars was accused of heresy, magic, and abominable practices. What was the real cause of this persecution? Quote, the avowed object of the Templars was to protect the Christians who came to visit the holy shrines of Palestine. Their secret object was the rebuilding of the Temple of Solomon on the model prophesied by Ezekiel, end quote. The secret superiors of the order were students of the Kabbalah, antagonistic to the dogmas of the Church. The Masonic degree of Cadash is directed against temporal and spiritual tyranny. De Molay is the symbol of the good man persecuted, and the Masonic drama woven about him admonishes the candidate to arm himself against the encroachment of king or priest. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. The body in the coffin was that of General Albert Pike, for so many years Sovereign Grand Commander of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite for the southern jurisdiction of the United States. I shall never forget the impression made upon me by that splendid, awe-inspiring funeral service. I was not a Freemason at the time, but I secretly vowed to become one at the first favorable opportunity. Often had I seen General Pike in the streets of Washington, his snow-white hair falling about his shoulders like the mane of a lion, his broad, expansive forehead, his serene countenance, his powerful frame awoke thoughts in me of some far-off time. The conventional dress of an American citizen did not seem suited to such a splendid personality. The costume of an ancient Greek would have been more in keeping with such a face and figure, such a habit as Plato wore when he discoursed upon divine philosophy to his students among the groves of the Academy of Athens beneath the brilliant sun of Greece. Who knows but that Albert Pike was not a reincarnation of Plato walking these 19th century streets of ours? Plato was so named, it is said, because of his broad shoulders. Plato was distinguished for manly beauty. Quote, to creative imagination of the first order, he added logical, analytical, and constructive powers. Above all, he was penetrated with the conviction of a harmony in the universe of being, which led to the conception of a high ideal of life and supplied him with the strength of purpose consistently to maintain it. End quote. To convince men of God, the soul, and immortality was the great purpose of Plato and his philosophy. How like unto Plato in character and ideals was Albert Pike. I never met this great thinker, Pike, this real master of the veils, as Buck calls him in his mystic masonry. I knew him by sight only, and the very last time I set eyes upon him, was at that weird midnight funeral of the Kadash, when he lay so peacefully in his coffin, the lights of the wax tapers shining upon him, his face frozen into that icy calm which we call death, his hands and feet bound with the symbolical cords from which he was finally released by the knights, the cords typical of the thraldom of human nature to the passions of this mortal career, of the soul to its body. But the great soul had already winged its flight to more subtle spheres of spirit, bursting the doors of its sepulchre of clay like the golden butterfly its chrysalis. The splendor of that face, even in death, framed in by its wealth of snow-white hair, made a picture that shall live long in my memory. I said to myself, here lies the apostle of liberty, equality, and fraternity, against whom the Vatican launched its thunders, and who stood up like Olympian Jove and hurled back at Rome the thunderbolt of the Masonic hierarchy, anathema for anathema, encyclical for encyclical. Even after his death, his memory was aspersed by Jesuit or evil writers. Gabriel Jogan Pages, the arch-liar of the 19th century, hoodwinked the church into believing that Masonry was the very spawn of the devil, that its inner circles did homage to Satan and practiced the Black Mass, and that Beelzebub's vice-regent on earth was General Albert Pike. The Catholic press of Europe reeked with absurd and abominable stories until Pages acknowledged his imposture. General Pike was a profound student of philosophy, philology, comparative religions, ancient symbolism, occult imitations, and the Kabbalah. He was a master of Greek, Latin, Hebrew, and other languages, classical and modern. In his old age, he translated the Rig Veda, the Zend Avesta, and other sacred books of Aryan literature with comments. 18 manuscript volumes of these translations are in the possession of the Supreme Council at Washington. This was the crowning glory of a life of usefulness. Perhaps the most difficult language in the world to acquire is the old Sanskrit of our Aryan ancestors. But Pike, when upwards of 70 years of age, learned Sanskrit in order to translate the Vedas. His studies in the theosophies of the Orient convinced him that the true word of a master mason was traceable to Aryan and Indo-Aryan sources from which it filtered into Egypt and other countries. From the land of the Mizraim, it was absorbed into the Kabbalah of the Jews. Greece and Rome preserved it in their mysteries. Masonry inherited it from the Kabbalah. The true word of a master is the ineffable name of God about which so many legends cluster. According to sacred writ, it was communicated by the deity to Moses upon Mount Horeb. But the adepts of India, Chaldea, Persia, and Egypt were in possession of this sacred name. Tradition says that its pronunciation caused the earth to quake and the angels of heaven to tremble with fear. It was a word of power, but its true meaning and pronunciation has been lost to the world. The idea of Masonry is to recover this word, which was known to Solomon, Hiram, king of Tyre, and Hiram, the widow's son, the three grand masters of the temple. But let us not mistake allegory for fact, the symbol for the thing symbolized. The last word is a symbol of the occult doctrine which treats of the nature and attributes of the great first cause and man's relation thereto. That doctrine, which runs like a vein of gold through the mountains of superstition, myth, and allegory, the secret doctrine taught to the initiates of the temples. Says Pike, quote, "The ineffable name not only embodies the great philosophical idea that the deity is the ens, the to on, the absolute existence, that of which the essence is to exist, the only substance of Spinoza, the being that never could not have existed, as contradistinguished from that which only becomes. Not nature or the soul of nature, but that which created nature, but also the idea of the male and female principles in its highest and most profound sense, to wit, that God originally comprehended in himself all that is, that matter was not coexistent with him or independent of him, that he did not merely fashion and shape a pre-existing chaos into a universe, but that his thought manifested itself outwardly in that universe, which so became and before was not, except as comprehended in him, that the generative power or spirit and the productive matter ever among the ancients deemed the female originally were in God, and that he was and is all that was and is and that shall be, in whom all else lives, moves, and has its being. This was the great mystery of the ineffable name. And of course its true pronunciation and its meaning became lost to all except the select few to whom it was confided, it being concealed from the common people, because the deity thus metaphysically named was not that personal and capricious and as it were tangible God in whom they believed, and who alone was within reach of their rude capacities. This was the profound truth, hidden in the ancient allegory and covered from the general view with a double veil. This was the exoteric meaning of the generation and production of the Indian, Chaldean, and Phoenician cosmogonies, of the active and passive powers, of the male and female principles, of heaven and its luminaries generating, and the earth producing, all hidden from vulgar view as above its comprehension. The doctrine that matter is not eternal, but that God was the only original existence, the absolute from whom everything has proceeded and to whom all returns. And this true word is with entire accuracy said to have been lost, because its meaning was lost, even among the Hebrews, although we still find the name, its real meaning unsuspected, in the Hu of the Druids and Fo Hai of the Chinese. That can be found in Morals and Dogma, page 700 et seq. Albert Pike held correctly that this occult doctrine is contained in the symbols of the first 3 degrees of Masonry, known as the Blue Lodge, but that the neophyte does not obtain it until he enters the sanctum sanctoria of the Scottish Rite, and then only after deep study and contemplation. The Blue Lodge bears the same relationship to the Scottish Rite that the lesser mysteries of Egypt did to the greater mysteries. In the former, the symbols are covered to the neophyte, only a few trite ethical explanations of them being imparted to him. In the latter, Isis is unveiled, and the glory of the goddess is seen by the devout initiate. In other words, the candidate passes from the square, which is the symbol of the earthly and material, to the compasses, which is the symbol of the heavenly and spiritual. From science to philosophy. Science is the collating of facts. Philosophy is the most modern acceptation of the term, is a synthesis of all facts. The endeavor to reduce the many to unity, and to discover, if possible, the principles upon which things are based. But there are 2 schools of philosophy. 2 schools of philosophy, one materialistic, interpreting nature and man in terms of unconscious force, mechanical, atheistic. The other, the idealistic, which posits a psychic principle as the foundation of all things, and interprets nature and man in terms of spirit. Masonry is wedded to the latter worldview and follows in the footsteps of Plato, Pythagoras, the Hindu sages and modern thinkers like Descartes, Leibniz, Martineau, Goethe, Fiske, etc. Albert Pike is its greatest expounder. His work, The Morals and Dogma of the Scottish Rite, is a mine of information, as well as a monument to its author, which will outlive any giant pyramid of stone that could be erected. There is a powerful chapter in Victor Hugo's Notre Dame, in which Claude Frollo, the archdeacon, a dabbler in alchemy, entertains several old cronies in his cell in the cloister of the cathedral. Upon his table lies a printed book, one of the products of Gutenberg's press. Opening the window of his cell, the archdeacon, pointing his finger at the immense Notre Dame, which looms up against the starry sky like an enormous two-headed sphinx, and laying his hand upon the volume on the table, utters the enigmatic sentence, quote, "This will kill that," end quote. In other words, printing will kill architecture. In the old days, great temples were Bibles in stone, built to perpetuate the memory of men and the ideas of their epoch. But the Bible of paper is not only cheaper, but capable of infinite duplication. It will eventually kill the stone Bible. An insignificant marble marks the last resting place of Albert Pike in Oak Hill Cemetery, Washington, D.C. The superficial observer may wonder that the Masons of the United States did not erect a magnificent mausoleum for the repose of the bones of its greatest adept. A splendid sarcophagus of Egyptian marble, upheld by 4 winged sphinxes, with a stone canopy over the whole supported by ponderous pillars, might easily have been built. But Pike needs none such Bible of stone to perpetuate his memory. His literary works are his most enduring monument. A great book will outlast the pyramids of Egypt. Every Freemason who takes the 14th degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite for the Southern jurisdiction, which includes all the states west of the Mississippi River, the insular possessions of the United States, and the Army and Navy, receives a copy of the Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike, which is published by the Supreme Council of the Order at Washington. It is a volume of 861 pages, closely printed and illustrated with symbols. The Morals and Dogma is professedly a commentary on the various degrees of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, from entered apprentice to the 32nd degree, inclusive. But it is much more than that. It is a study of comparative religions and symbology, a lofty treatise on ethics, an unfolding of the occult doctrines of the ancient world, as well as a work on philosophy. It has necessarily been compiled from many sources. The thoughts of the ancient sages adorn its pages, but upon every page we also see the stamp of Albert Pike's original creative genius. The style, though diffuse at times, is distinguished by poetic fire and a noble simplicity. It carries conviction with it. To Eliphas Levi, a French mystic and Kabbalist, Pike was much indebted. Long before any of Levi's writings were translated into English, General Pike was reading them with avidity. In compiling The Knight of the Sun, or Prince Adept, the 28th degree of the Rite, Albert Pike borrowed from Levi's work on occulture a number of the latter's symbolical figures. A few extants from the Morals and Dogma will show the lofty thought contained therein. Though Masonry neither usurps the place of nor apes religion, prayer is an essential part of our ceremonies. It is the aspiration of the soul toward the absolute and infinite intelligence, which is the one supreme deity, most feebly and misunderstandingly characterized as an architect. Certain faculties of man are directed toward the unknown: thought, meditation, prayer. The unknown is an ocean of which conscience is the compass. Thought, meditation, prayer are the great mysterious pointings of the needle. It is a spiritual magnetism that thus connects the human soul with the deity. These majestic irradiations of the soul pierce through the shadow toward the light.
And that God had lied to them, to hold them prisoner, to tend to the garden, when in fact they could become as gods. And that is the promise of Freemasonry. It is the promise of Satan. It is the promise of Albert Pike. I suggest that you look up a copy of Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma You can find hundreds of them in used bookstores. Get one while the getting's good, because I understand that the Brotherhood is attempting to buy them all up. And if you ask them about what Pike says, they claim that Spike never spoke for Freemasonry, and that no man speaks for Freemasonry. And ladies and gentlemen, that is just another one of their thousands and millions of lies. For he was the Grand Inspector General of the Council of the 33rd Degree of the Southern Jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, the supreme post of the order in this country, and some say in the world. The universe that Pike speaks of as the great Bible of God, quote, material nature is its Old Testament, millions of years old, thick with eternal truths under our feet, glittering with everlasting glories over our heads, and human nature is the New Testament, from the infinite God, every day revealing a new page as time turns over the leaves. Everything is a thought of the infinite God. Nature is his prose and man his poetry, end quote. The grand objects of nature perpetually constrain men to think of their author. The Alps are the great altar of Europe. The nocturnal sky has been to mankind the dome of a temple starred all over with admonitions to reverence, trust, and love. Science gratifies the religious feeling without arresting it and opens out the unfathomable mystery of the One Supreme into more explicit and manageable forms, which express not indeed his essence, which is wholly beyond our reach and higher than our faculties can climb, but his will, and so feeds an endless enthusiasm by accumulating forever new objects of pursuit. We have long experienced that knowledge is profitable. We are beginning to find out that it is moral, and we shall at last discover it to be religious, end quote. For the true religion of which they speak, ladies and gentlemen, is neither Lucifer or Jehovah or Adonai or El or any of the other names that you may call whatever your version of God may be, but it is that flame, that fire known as the intellect of man, through the use of which man himself will become God. That is the truth of the lost light, the lost word of Freemasonry. In the following discourse is contained the very quintessence of philosophy and religion according to the Brotherhood. Quote, doubt in presence of being and its harmonies, skepticism in the face of the eternal mathematics and the immutable laws of life, which make the divinity present and visible everywhere, as the human is known and visible by its utterances of word and act. Is this not the most foolish of superstitions, and the most inexcusable as well as the most dangerous of all credulities? Let me read that again to you, folks, so that you can ponder it. This, they believe, is the very quintessence of philosophy and religion. Quote, doubt in presence of being and its harmonies, skepticism in the face of the eternal mathematics and the immutable laws of life which make the divinity present and visible everywhere, as the human is known and visible by its utterances of word and act. Is this not the most foolish of superstitions and the most inexcusable as well as the most dangerous of all credulities? Thought, we know, is not a result or consequence of the organization of matter, of the chemical or other action or reaction of its particles, like effervescence and gaseous explosions. On the contrary, the fact that thought is manifested and realized in act human or act divine proves the existence of an entity or unity that thinks.
and the universe is the infinite utterance of an infinite number of infinite thoughts, which cannot but emanate from an infinite and thinking source. The cause is always equal, at least to the effect. And matter cannot think, nor could it cause itself, or exist without cause, nor could nothing produce either forces or things. For in void nothingness, no forces can inhere. Admit a self-existent force and its intelligence, or an intelligence cause of it, as admitted and at once God is. Albert Pike had a horror of atheism as a philosophic creed. He agreed with Jean-Paul Richter, who speaks of the atheist as living alone in the world, with a heart empty and made desolate by the loss of his Creator and Father. He mourns by the side of the huge corpse of nature, which no spirit animates as it lingers in the tomb, and his sorrow shall continue to the moment when dissolution severs him from this corpse, of which he is but an atom. The world poses before him like an Egyptian sphinx, half buried in sand, and the universe is but a mask, the iron mask of a vague eternity. Briefly told, Albert Pike's life is as follows. He was born in Boston, Massachusetts, December the 29th, 1809, and was educated at Harvard. For some years he engaged in teaching. In 1831 he accompanied an expedition to Santa Fe and subsequently explored the headwaters of the Red and Brazos rivers. In December 1832 we find him located at Fort Smith, Arkansas. He edited the Arkansas Advocate in 1833 to 1836 and was admitted to the bar. He commanded a squadron in the Mexican War and fought at Buena Vista. In 1847 he received the surrender at Mapami. When in the Civil War broke out, the Confederate government appointed him Indian Commissioner and later Brigadier General. After the war he practiced law in Memphis and edited the Memphis Appeal from 1867 to 68. In the year 1868 he removed to Washington, where he practiced law until 1880, after which period he devoted his time to the Scottish Rite, revising and elaborating the rituals of the old French degree and writing the philosophical lectures to accompany them, also engaging in other literary labors of a Masonic character. In his 20th year, General Pike wrote his Hymns to the Gods. Notice that's Hymns to the Gods, plural, published in Blackwood's magazine in 1839, thus establishing his reputation as a poet of the first rank. There were subsequently included in Nagai, a volume of poems privately printed in 1854. In 1873 and 1882 he issued two other collections of poems which were privately printed. The Battle Hymn of the Confederacy was written by Pike to the air of Dixie. During his career as a lawyer, Pike wrote a number of law books of value, but his reputation was established by his Morals and Dogma, 1870, and his remarkable poems. In a chapter of Royal Ark Masons, there are three officers who bear the title of Master of the Veils. These veils are, like those of the tabernacle, set up in the wilderness of four colors: blue, purple, scarlet, and white. Josephus says that they represented the four elements. Each master of a veil is armed with a sword and bears a banner of the appropriate color. One of them is stationed at the blue, another at the purple, and yet another at the scarlet veil. It is the Royal Ark captain, however, who guards the white veil. This, ladies and gentlemen, was written by a Freemason of the 33rd degree of the southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, Henry Ridgely Evans, and it is entitled The Master of the Veils. It was printed in the official magazine for the Supreme Council of the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, entitled The New Age. This appeared in volume number 9, that's Roman numeral 9, June 1908 to December 1908, should you wish to look it up. Should you also wish to explore the true writings of General Albert Pike, you'll find that he was not a Christian. You'll find that the God that he believed in, ladies and gentlemen, was not the God of the Bible, for he believed that that Bible represented a God who was vicious and cruel, and that man's true Savior was not Jesus Christ, whom you will find was never mentioned in any of that article, is never mentioned in any of the writings of General Albert Pike, but he does make frequent reference to his true God and his true Savior, the one that he believes through the interpretation of the mystery religion of the account of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden to be Lucifer, who set man free from the imprisonment in the garden, and his caretaking, innocent, and thus stupid status brought him the gift of fire, intellect, so that man himself could know good and evil. And through the use of that intellect and his experience through the ages, partaking of the good and the evil, will someday himself become God. That is the true lost word, lost light. That is the truth of these secret fraternal orders. I doubt seriously if anybody at the lower degrees knows anything about any of it. And that is why they have the pyramidal structure of degrees, and there are so few at the top and so many at the bottom. That is why they must take blood oaths to protect the secrets, to protect the brotherhood, and to protect each other. They are consummate liars. I have no beef with their religion, for they have a right to practice whichever religion they wish, ladies and gentlemen. Their ultimate accounting will be to God, not to me. My beef with them is in their lying to the rest of us, in their gross deceptions to guide humanity in a direction which we may not wish to go, in their tremendous unfairness in giving their fellow brothers the deal over the man who is not a fellow brother, and in giving the grossest convictions and awards in courts of law to those who they call the profane, while letting their brothers go free, or letting them off with a pat on the hand, or a small fine, or a very short sentence, and huge rewards in civil cases. You'll find that most judges, not all, most judges in city, state, and federal courts belong to one or other of the fraternal orders which harbor at the highest degrees those known as the Illuminati. The ones who believe themselves to be the receptacles of the only truly mature minds, and thus the only ones, they say, rightfully destined to rule the cattle, which is you and I. As much due diligence as they have practiced to attempt to keep all of this a secret, ladies and gentlemen, over the hundreds and thousands of years of their existence, it has crept out in writings and in hieroglyphic reliefs, in books,
in symbols, in ceremonies, in the relief, and in the buildings of ancient and modern architecture. They made reference in the article that the ancient cathedrals were the Bibles of their day, where the religion was recorded in the edifice in stone. What they don't tell you, that when the ancient cathedrals of Europe were dismantled over the years one by one to be cleaned and rebuilt and shored up to make them safer for modern congregations and for tourists and for history, when the great slab stone was lifted from the top of the altar, in each and every one was found a great stone penis, the phallus of Osiris. And I could go on and on and on, and this is all a matter of historical record. But read Morals and Dogma, read everything that you can by Albert Pike. You'll find that he is acknowledged in the works of Freemasons everywhere as the greatest Freemason who has ever lived, and the one who opened up the lost word so that they could all understand it more easily. And if you read his works diligently, your mind will suddenly see a glimmer through the fog. As you walk toward that glimmer and you study his works more, you will see that the fog will part. And there truly indeed will be a light, ladies and gentlemen, but it will be the light of your intellect shining upon the black light of the lies of Freemasonry, and will reveal to you that Lucifer is their God. But not in any sense of reality, for they do not acknowledge that there is a Lucifer or a Jehovah or an Adonai or a Yahweh. They believe that their God is themselves. That all of these other things are just symbols, metaphors, and allegories. Veils, if you will. Veils that hide the truth from all but the very highest degrees, the most studied of the brotherhood, those that are admitted to the very sacrosanct caverns and groves, if you will. And only those who have studied the symbology of the mysteries will understand what I just said. And I said it purposely for them. To ultimately disappear behind the veil themselves and to become one of the 1,000 points of light, working toward the completion of the great work, the final examination of the grand experiment, to place their king upon the throne of the world. They will do this when they have eliminated all existing religions save theirs. And you will notice that all religions in the world are changing now, coming closer together, becoming more humanistic in their thinking, practicing what's known as liberation theology, which, ladies and gentlemen, is nothing more than Marxism. And Marxism renounces God. The ultimate end of the blending of all of this and the coming together will be the practice of the religion of Freemasonry, which is itself the ancient religion of Babylon, reborn in the modern age after it has been kept hidden. Kept hidden, ladies and gentlemen, in the little boat made of reeds, floating through the waters of life until it is found by the handmaiden of Pharaoh's daughter, who will then take the young babe Horus out, walk it to the farthest extent of Pride Rock, and hold it aloft for all to see. And then, ladies and gentlemen, there will be no more nation states. There will be no more wars. There will be no more various religions scattered throughout the world. There will be no more than 500 million people upon the face of this earth. And there will never be allowed to be any more than that number. And there will be no more freedom for anyone. Information will be controlled. History will disappear and be rewritten, so there will be no memory of what has gone before. And there will be no hope of deliverance, for the technology that they are developing in secret will be the most terrible weapons of destruction for those who will oppose the great new utopian socialist world order that has ever been contemplated in the mind of man in the history of this world, and can little be imagined. It's not too late to turn it around. But based upon my observations and my experience, no such thing will happen. No such thing will happen, ladies and gentlemen. And when they begin to squeeze the pinchers and disarm the American people and bring together this utopian socialist order upon the ashes of what once was the greatest nation upon the face of this earth, bar none, in the history of the world, and the freest, most educated, most well-off people who have ever lived upon this earth, a small handful of men like me and women will stand and fight the last battle for freedom. It will be a long battle, and it will be fought over many years. And there will be a lot of crying and suffering. And I haven't the slightest idea who's going to win that battle, ladies and gentlemen. But I know something from my study of the world and its history. Those who fight for ideas and who are willing to die for those ideas have never been beaten in the history of the world, not once. Those who fight for a paycheck and a promise of a retirement are the easiest armies to defeat and always have been, regardless of the magnitude or the terror of their weapons. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Think about tonight's episode of The Hour of the Time and determine what it is that you will do. Will you bend down and place the chains around your own ankles and march docilely into your enslavement? Or will you join with those of us who will fight that last battle for freedom? You see, you're going to die someday anyway. Why not die for something that's right and something that's good, if you're going to die? And I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, despite the fact that some may think they are God, we are all going to die. God bless each and every single one of you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, you know why William Jefferson Clinton called me, William Cooper, the most dangerous radio host in America. For I am the greatest enemy that socialism has ever known. and the only weapon that I wield is truth.
I'm William Cooper, and this is the Hour of the Time. Make sure you have pen and paper again ready with you tonight, ladies and gentlemen, because once again, we're going to be covering some highly unusual information. But I want to tell you right off the bat, if you have a computer, there is nothing that I'm going to give you tonight that is not on our website. So, if you miss something, you can go to the website and you can get all of this stuff. Well, not quite all of it. Almost all of it. Let me put it that way. So, pay attention, because this is one of those nights in your continuing education on the lost light. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. This according to the Thelemic order of the Golden Dawn. At the very top of their emblem, ladies and gentlemen, is the symbol of the rose. There is now established in the world a new order of the Golden Dawn. It is a magical, religious, scientific order dedicated to the teachings of Aleister Crowley. The principal function of the new order is to assist in the initiation of aspirants into the magical life of Thelema. It is a magical order of the new aeon, wherein men and women, by the essential aids of science and religion, can participate in the great work of Thelema. The new order of the Golden Dawn is called in the Latin tongue Novus Ordo Aurora Aurea. It is also called the Order of the Thelemic Golden Dawn. The Golden Dawn now embraces and upholds the law of Thelema and seeks to extend that law in the world to establish the new kingdom of Horus upon earth. The rising god of the new temple is Horus, the crowned and conquering child of the new aeon, born from the past, aeons of Isis and Osiris. The old temple has been transformed into a new temple for our Lord Horus to indwell, that the great work of the new aeon may be accomplished in his name. Love is the law, love under will. Those of you who have been listening to this broadcast for quite some time will have no trouble interpreting what I just read. Those of you who have not probably think it's just a bunch of mumbo-jumbo, but I can assure you that it has the utmost importance for your future well-being and the future freedom of your children and grandchildren. Aeon, as you know, means age in the Greek. So new aeon means new age. It is the magical order of the new age, wherein men and women, by the essential aids of science and religion, meaning their religion, can participate in the great work of Thelema. And for all practical purposes, you could just leave off of Thelema, because the great work is, after all, the great work. And gentlemen, is the full body of initiates upon earth. The rising god of the new temple is Horus. Now, do you understand what that means? The rising god of the new temple is Horus, the full body of the adepts, the initiates of the secret orders, the crowned and conquering child of the new aeon, meaning new age, born from the past aeons of Isis and Osiris, meaning that they have learned from the mistakes of the past, and they intend to exert their influence and control over the world. They say the old temple has been transformed into a new temple for our Lord Horus to indwell. Now, if you understand what that means, it means that man is God. The Lord Horus, the full body of adepts, the only truly mature minds endowed to rule upon this earth. And that the great work, the accomplishment of the bringing in of the new totalitarian socialist order of the new age may be accomplished in his name. Whose name? Horus's name. Who is Horus? Well, I said it 3 times. If you didn't catch it, I don't know how else to tell you, ladies and gentlemen. Most of you who've been living your life in fantasy and ignoring what's going on around you and thinking that all of this stuff is just a bunch of gobbledygook are in for the shock of your lives. In fact, I think that when all this comes down, I really believe this in my heart, many of you will just simply lose your mind. You will wander about the streets in a daze, sort of a trance, not being able to comprehend what has happened or why or who brought it about. Why you have to bear such a terrible burden of suffering during the chaotic transition from the new disintegration of the old society to the old implementation of the new world order. But it will happen exactly that way. Why did I put it in those terms, ladies and gentlemen? Because there truly is nothing new under the sun. I know that many of you believe that you know the story of Christopher Columbus. I think that most of us, especially in the United States of America, in Spain, probably in the great maritime countries of Europe, such as Portugal and England and Holland, have studied the life of Christopher Columbus at some point in our lives, and if not, we at least cursorily brushed over it in school. And the story is different depending upon where you hear it, but I can guarantee you the public or exoteric version of the story is not the true tale, ladies and gentlemen. And they hear a different story in Latin America and in the Caribbean Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico than they do in North America. And there is a different story told in Spain and in Portugal and in England that is told in the Americas. Which story is the correct story? And why is it important that we should know these things? And what does it have to do with the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas, which, ladies and gentlemen, from the air is a huge, gigantic green cross with the huge head of a lion over the main entrance, diagonal to the crux of the cross, and the lion is looking directly at the pyramid of the Luxor Hotel, and the beam of light that nightly shines up into outer space, the brightest light upon the face of this earth. What is the connection? Is there a connection? Well, I can guarantee you there is. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, there is. There's also a connection with Mikhail Gorbachev's foundation, which flies the flag with a green cross upon it, and his Green Cross organization, which, by the way, is busy as a hornet's nest, trying to bring about the dissolution of nation-states, religions, and the formation of world government, and they make no secret about it. Well, just what is this connection, ladies and gentlemen? And what has it got to do with Christopher Columbus? Well, let's see if we can discover exactly where that link is, if we can. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, that the Knights Templar were not a church organization. They were founded on the Temple Mount by the King of Jerusalem. They were not recognized by the church until many years later, when they rose to a position of extreme power and wealth And it was all political, had nothing to do with the worship of Jesus Christ or Christianity, I can assure you. And they never, in their history, protected the pilgrims on their way to and from the Middle East. That is a myth. A complete myth, ladies and gentlemen. One of their goals was to rebuild the Temple of Solomon. But that is a metaphor for their true purpose, ladies and gentlemen, which had nothing to do with building a stone temple upon the mount in Jerusalem. It had to do with the perfection of humanity and the bringing about of a new race of men. So with that small a bit of knowledge to prepare you for what I'm going to give you now, I hope that you will be able to understand it. James Wolfe lived a year on San Salvador Island in the Bahamas. He had to read the untold story. So in a nutshell, he wrote a few strings of what he learned. Seems as if Mr. George Grant in his book The Last Crusader sees the trip as a way to raise money to help fund another crusade. An hour before moonrise on October the 11th, Columbus saw, or thought he saw, a light in the darkness along the western horizon. He wrote, and I quote, "like a little wax candle rising and falling," end quote. In his daily logbook entry for December the 26th, 1492, the Admiral wrote, quote, "I hope to God that when I come back here from Castile, which I intend on doing, that I will find a barrel of gold for which these people I am leaving will have traded, and that they will have found the gold mine and the spices, and in such quantities that within 3 years the sovereigns will prepare for and undertake the reconquest of the Holy Land. I have already petitioned your holinesses to see that all the profits of this my enterprise should be spent on the conquest of Jerusalem. And your highness smiled and said that the idea pleased them, and that even without the expedition they had the inclination to do it." In a letter to Isabella, he asserted, "The argument I have for the restitution of the Temple Mount to the Holy Church is simple. I only hold fast to the Holy Scriptures and to the prophetic citations attributed to certain holy men who were carried along by divine wisdom. Remember with what little cost you undertook the reconquest of Granada, and with what great reward." Later, in a letter to Pope Alexander VI, he underscored the seriousness of his intentions. "The enterprise must be undertaken in order to spend any profits therein for the redemption of the sepulchre and the Temple Mount unto the Holy Church." And 2 more times he wrote, "I must repeat, for the execution of the enterprise to the Indies neither reason nor mathematics nor cartography were of profit to me in the manner that the prophecies of Scripture were. This is what I have to report concerning the liberation of Jerusalem. Be glad. If there is any faith in us, the enterprise is bound for victory. At the time I was motivated by the Scriptures to go to discover the Indies. I went to the royal court with the intention of entreating our sovereigns to specify revenues that they might accrue to be spent on the reconquest of Jerusalem. So this last crusader set sail for Jerusalem, and somewhere along the way, ladies and gentlemen, he discovered America." Sounds like a Knight Templar to me, but still the question was he connected to the Templars? Vigent and Lay, in their book The Temple and the Lodge, write that in Portugal the Templars were cleared by an inquiry and simply modified their name. I revealed this to you many years ago, becoming the Knights of Christ. Vasco da Gama was a Knight of Christ. Prince Henry the Navigator was a Grand Master of the Order. Ships of the Knights of Christ sailed under the Templars' familiar red pate cross. And it was under the same cross that Columbus's 3 caravels crossed the Atlantic to the New World. Columbus himself was married to the daughter of a former Grand Master of the Order and had access to his father-in-law's charts and diaries. Stephen Howarth, in his book The Knights Templar, feels that due to the Templars' secrecy and unknown events, fantastic notions and myths can neither be proved nor disproved. And of course, that is what they want you to believe. And thus some people like to believe that the Templars found the Ark of the Covenant. Surviving Portuguese Templars were absorbed into a new royal military order. Christopher Columbus was a Templar. Brother John J. Robinson writes in his book Dungeon, Fire, and Sword, in Portugal, King Denis I took both men and properties of the Templars into a new secular order called the Militia of Jesus Christ, or more popularly, the Knights of Christ, responsible directly to the king. In 1319, the order received the papal blessing of John the 22nd, who recognized it as a revival of the Knights Templar. Its most famous Prince Henry the Navigator and Vasco da Gama. The Knights of Christ used the distinctive red cross pate worn by the Templars, the same cross that artists used to decorate the sails of Columbus's ships, the Niña, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. But, and this is cleverly omitted from the book, ladies and gentlemen, and from the book review, the flag Columbus planted on the beach when he landed for the first time in the New World was a white flag bearing a green cross. And all the while, the King and Queen of Spain thought that he went there to claim that land for him and rightfully should have planted the flag of the royal house of Spain. But that is not at all what happened. The flag, ladies and gentlemen, the green cross upon a white field that Columbus planted in the New World to claim the New World for a secret order of the Knights Templar. And that is the truth. Have you ever, ladies and gentlemen, wondered where the origination of Friday the 13th actually occurred? Well, it occurred in France. And I'm going to tell you that story now. I've told it to you before. But you see, I always get these letters from people who say, "I don't believe what you're saying, Bill Cooper." So I will read you the research of someone else, Nancy J. Gill. And here's what she says. "I recently checked out a book from the library called Off the Road, a modern-day walk down the Pilgrim's Route into Spain. Copyright 1994, published by Simon & Schuster. The author, Jack Hitt, decided to sidestep an anticipated midlife crises by abandoning his safe, comfortable American life to follow the pilgrimage route to Santiago de Compostela, Spain, the putative final resting place of St. James the Apostle. Lasting 2 months or more, depending on the starting place, the walk traditionally winds up just before St. James' feast day, July 25th. Along the route of Europe's oldest form of packaged tour, he encountered a varied cast of characters and a host of legends, and one in particular caught my eye. And this is the story. The King of France at the turn of the 14th century was known as an uncommonly handsome man. He was called Philippe le Bel, the Beautiful. Philip the Beautiful. An ironic epithet for a king of Gothic pitilessness. Because of the French king's constant financial problems, relations between Paris and Rome had degenerated into a ludicrous state of affairs. The Beautiful had exhausted all the usual medieval methods for balancing the books. He had stolen all the property that he could. He had arrested all the Jews and taken their wealth. He had devalued his currency. So as a last resort, he tried to tax the church. But Pope Boniface VIII was a fat and dissolute pontiff. One contemporary described him as nothing but eyes and tongue in a holy, putrefying body, a devil. The Beautiful himself openly referred to him as your fatuity, but Boniface knew the rules of the game as well. And this is the true story, ladies and gentlemen, of the Beauty and the Beast. And the end of the story is the hopeful reunion between all of these warring factions, some beautiful, some ugly, but absolutely necessary to bring the world together into one. The Beautiful himself openly referred to him as your fatuity. Can you imagine that, calling the Pope such a name? In retaliation for France's new fiscal arrangements, the Pope issued a dictum forbidding the taxation of the clergy. And here you have a rock and a hard spot. So the Beautiful closed French borders to the exportation of gold bullion, cutting off Rome's transalpine money supply. And to rub it in, he arrested the Bishop of Pamiers and charged him with blasphemy, sorcery, and fornication. And you know what? At least some of it was probably true. So the Pope issued a bull condemning the arrest and revoked some of the Beautiful's papal privileges. Well, Philippe le Bel burned his copy of the bull in public. And folks, for those of you who don't understand all of this, a bull is not an animal with horns here. A bull issued by the Pope is an order, as a matter of fact, an edict, if you will. The Pope, in turn, delivered a stinging sermon filled with ominous warnings that the church was a creature with one head, not a monster with two. And the Beautiful issued charges in absentia against the Pope himself, alleging blasphemy, sorcery, and sodomy. Fornication wasn't big enough for the Pope, had to be sodomy. The Pope, in turn, excommunicated the Beautiful. Now that's a real serious thing in those days, folks. He compared the French to dogs and hinted that they lacked souls. His nuncios leaked a rumor that the pontiff might well excommunicate the entire country. Sound a little like your children at play in the backyard? The peasants were stirred by such threats, and the Beautiful quickly grasped that revolution was a better future to them than excommunication, so he acted fast, dispatching an army to Anagni, where the Pope was staying. He placed the 86-year-old pontiff under house arrest. The locals, however, managed to save him, but a month later Boniface passed away, and some allege that he succumbed to shock at the outrage. Beautiful returned to his economic problems. His wife died in 1305, and since he no longer would have to kiss a woman's lips, he applied for membership in the Knights Templar. The permanent Knights of the Paris Temple may have suspected that his intentions were less than pious, and did something almost unspeakable. They blackballed the king. Now, in case you don't know what that means, even today in the Masonic Lodge, when a member, or when a profane is proposed for membership by one of the order, all of the members are given two little balls, one white and one black. And a box is passed around amongst the membership. And folks, when the box is opened, if there is one black ball in the box, the candidate cannot be admitted. for initiation into the order or into the lodge. So apparently, Philippe le Bel received at least one black ball in the box when the Templars passed the box around the membership, for they blackballed the king. Now, you don't just blackball a king. The following year, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar, Jacques de Molay, returned to Europe from the Mediterranean in a show of luxury. He was accompanied by 60 knights in a baggage train of mules laden with gold and jewels. And around that time, the Beautiful was more desperate than ever to solve his messy state finances. He tripled the price of everything in France overnight. An open rebellion broke out in the streets. Rioters threatened to kill him. He fled to the Parisian temple and begged the knights for protection. Oh, how humiliating. So in the fall of 1307, Philippe le Bel, the Beautiful, arranged a state action impressive even in these days of data highways and rapid deployment teams, because this is something that is so difficult to pull off. On September 14th, he mass-mailed a set of sealed orders to every bailiff, seneschal, deputy, and officer in his entire kingdom. The functionaries were forbidden under penalty of death to open the papers before Thursday night, October the 12th. The following Friday morning, October the 13th, alert to their secret instructions, armies of officials slipped out of their barracks. By sundown, nearly all the Knights Templar throughout France were in jails. One estimate puts the arrest at 2,000, another as high as 5,000. Only 20 actually escaped from France. The initial charges were vague, but they didn't sound good. A bitter thing, a lamentable thing, a horrible to think of and terrible to hear. A detestable crime they were accused of, an execrable evil, an abominable act, a repulsive disgrace, a thing almost inhuman, indeed alien to all humanity, has, thanks to the reports of several trustworthy persons, reached our ear, smiting us grievously and causing us to tremble with the utmost horror. What followed was so foul, according to folklore, that Templar sympathizers cursed the day itself, condemning it as evil, Friday the 13th, whose reputation, ladies and gentlemen, has never recovered. And because of it, and because of the torture that followed, worked upon the Templars in their captivity, and the eventual burning at the stake, of almost all of them, including their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, the Templars who had fled France, and all of the Templars who were residing or traveling or happened to find themselves in other countries at the time, went underground, moved into the various fraternal orders that existed at that time, rose to the top and took them over. Some went to Scotland and fought with Robert the Bruce and were rewarded for their heroism, their valor, and their military help at a time when he needed it, at a time when their help actually gave Scotland the edge and they won their freedom from England and formed the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. The Templars have vowed, ladies and gentlemen, to strike back and destroy all the monarchies in the world, topple the kings and queens and princes from their thrones, to destroy the church, all existing religions, as they put it, and shackle the mob. Why were they angry at the mob, ladies and gentlemen? Because the profane peasantry and the middle class flocked to the burnings of the Templars and cheered and jeered and threw things at them and made fun of them in their misery and their suffering. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the origin of Friday the 13th. It is also why some of the most terrible upheavals in the history of the world since then have occurred in October. You ever hear of the October Revolution? The October stock market crashes, not one, not two, not three. If you've ever been to Washington, D.C., or for that matter, Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas, where John F. Kennedy was assassinated, you probably did not notice the occult symbology that surrounded you in these places, nor would you have noticed it being a profane, uninitiated, being illiterate in the secret language of the Brotherhood. You would not have noticed the same exact symbols in the outer courtyard of the Vatican, which is, ladies and gentlemen, a round temple of the sun, similar to Stonehenge, with an obelisk standing erect in the center, and there is always a reflecting pool. Usually somewhere around there will be a triangle of some sort or a pyramidal structure. There will always be columns. Recognize any of that, ladies and gentlemen? In case you don't know what an obelisk is, the Washington Monument is an obelisk. Pat Buchanan identified himself as a member of these secret orders last Christmas when he sent out as a Christmas card a picture of an obelisk with a red ribbon tied around its base, the two bows, or the two loops of the bow, signifying the testes. For the obelisk is really the symbol of the Phallus of Osiris, the lost word, the lost light, the severed part which Osiris was unable to find. Remember that the sun is the doctrine, Osiris. Isis is the church, the moon. The full body of adepts, the initiates, the Illuminati, or the child Horus, all searching for the lost word, the generative force, if you will, the creative power of God that is within them. And if you've been to the Luxor Pyramid Hotel in Las Vegas, I'm sure that many of you went through the 3 different entertainment acts called the Search for the Obelisk, and did not even realize that you were in a temple of initiation, and that when you left, in your subconscious, you were a Freemason, Master Mason, as a matter of fact, at that point, but without portfolio and without conscious memory or knowledge of what had just happened to you. In Washington, D.C., you will see the symbology everywhere. And if you go into the rotunda of the Capitol building and look straight up, a thing that most people never do, you will see that the people who built Washington, D.C. were not Christians, not ever. And most of the founding fathers were not either. They were deists. They were members of the Jacobin clubs. They were members of the Freemasonic lodges. George Washington and Benjamin Franklin were masters of their lodges. Thomas Jefferson actually defended Adam Weishaupt when the Illuminati was criticized publicly, just in case you thought it was all a big joke. It wasn't a joke to Thomas Jefferson, who, by the way, wrote his own Bible. He literally tore up the King James Version of the Bible, said it was disgusting. There could be no such God in this universe, and he wrote his own. Isn't it amazing how shocked you can be to learn that you have been taught lies over the years? And that even now that you're being given the truth, you will resist it and you will rave at me, the messenger, because you don't want to hear it, based upon sheer emotion alone, without even checking the facts, as you should do, as I admonish you to do. Listen to everyone, read everything, believe absolutely nothing unless you can prove it in your own research. Go out and prove me wrong, and you will shortly find that I am right, if you do your research properly. Also in Washington, D.C. is a building called the Pentagon, which houses the Magi. So the senior ranks of the military, there is made up in that circle of men a secret order founded by George Washington called the Knights of the Golden Circle. Its first chapter was formed among the officers who had served with George Washington during the Revolutionary War. Most of them were also Freemasons. A pentagon, ladies and gentlemen, is but a very thin disguise for a pentagram. That's right, for a pentagram. For a pentagon is made up of the lines drawn from the tips of the points of the pentagram, or the five-pointed star, to form a pentagram. Within every pentagon is a pentagram. Just in case you weren't aware of that. In the language of the initiates, the pentagram is also known as the Star of Light, when it represents or symbolizes the regenerate man or initiate. The Holy Pentagram, or Star of the Magi, according to Eliphas Levi, the great initiate of France, was known to the French Gnostic school as the Blazing Star. The sign of the intellectual, omnipotent, autocracy, or spiritually enlightened masters known amongst the adepts as the Magi. The Star of the Magi is the Word made flesh, and according to the direction of its rays, this absolute symbol represents good or evil, order or disorder. The saving Lamb of Ormond and St. John are the accursed goat of Mendes. It symbolizes initiation or profanation. It is at once Lucifer or Vesper, the morning or evening star. It is Mary or Lilith, victory or death, light or darkness. When the pentagram elevates two of its points, it, like the reversed triangle, represents Satan or the goat of the mysteries. When it elevates the one point, it is that star of light representing the Savior, goodness, virtue, adoration, reverence. And by Savior, they do not mean Jesus the Christ. They mean the Christ within, the God in man, the intellect that will ultimately make man God. The pentagram is the figure of the human body with its four limbs and a single point representing the head. The human figure with the head downward naturally represents a demonic force, intellectual overturning, misuse of the intellect, disorder, and final insanity. In the magic of the Magi, the hidden science of the occultists, it is a veritable law of the three worlds. The pentagram is an absolute sign, old as history, and more than history, exercises an incalculable influence over souls. The sign of the pentagram is also called the sign of the macrocosm, and represents what the Kabbalists call microprospos. A complete understanding of the pentagram offers man the key to the two worlds. It is the absolute in philosophy and science. The ancient Magi drew the sign of the pentagram on their doorsteps to protect them against evils and to seek the help of all that is good. The G, which ancient Freemasons placed in the center of the blazing star, signified gnosis and generation. It also symbolized the two sacred words, at the same time having reference to the grand architect or universal builder. All the mysteries of the Magi, all the symbols of the gnosis, all the figures of occultism, all the Kabbalistic keys of prophecy are summed up, ladies and gentlemen, in the sign of the pentagram, which was pronounced by Paracelsus the greatest and most potent of all signs. Those who paid little heed to the sign of the cross trembled at the sight of the star of the microcosm. And this was taken from the preface of Nidor Priestess of the Magi, or Blazing Star, by Dr. J.T. Bettiero, former Supreme Grand Preceptor of the Magi. How about that? I bet that made you stop and think, didn't it? If this is a Christian nation, why is there an obelisk representing the Phallus of Osiris in Washington, D.C.? Why, when you stand in the rotunda of the Capitol building and look straight up at the inside of the dome, do you see a painting of George Washington riding in the chariot, being pulled by the horses across the heavens as Apollo, the god of the sun? And why is it that around this big painting of George Washington in the chariot of Apollo are pictured all the old gods of the Roman pantheon? Mercury, Zeus, all of them, ladies and gentlemen. And why is there a huge pentagon hiding in its structure the greatest occult power known to man, the pentagram? And why are the streets shaped like the compass and the square? And all of the other symbology that exists there. I think you'd better wake up, ladies and gentlemen, for there has always been a secret destiny of America, and it has never been what you have always seemed to think. America has always been headed and directed and guided by the hand of the Illuminati. It was formed for the purpose of giving the common man, for the first time in the history of the world, real freedom. And once that revolutionary effect reverberated around the world, it toppled the kings and queens and princes from their thrones exactly as it was designed to do. And now they are in the process of going about their business of taking that freedom back from the common man and cementing their ties that they have made in the power structure of all the nations of the world, to dissolve all the existing religions, all existing nation states, to shackle the mob and bring about their final victory, their utopian socialist world government, which they call the Golden Dawn, the New World Order, the New Age. That moment of silence, ladies and gentlemen, is to let at least some of what you heard tonight sink in. For it had better sink in, and you had better wake up very quickly. For you've been had. We've all been had. By those whom we believed in and trusted,
who never, ever, not once believed or trusted in us, and all the while have been about completing the great work, the grand experiment. They believe that the end justifies the means, and there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that they will not do to accomplish their ends. Including blowing up more federal buildings and more trade centers, and burning and murdering more church members as they did in Waco, Texas. There is nothing that they will not do to accomplish their goal, including, ladies and gentlemen, preparing you with a string of propaganda that there are missing atomic bombs in the world, some as small as a suitcase. And once they have prepared you for the proper length of time, if they believe there is no other way to disarm the people of America and bring about the totalitarian state that they want, they will, and I tell you this, they will, and you can bet on it, you can take it to the bank, they will detonate an atomic bomb in an American city. Good night. And God bless each and every single one of you. And may God reach down in His big, endless bucket of mercy and save this republic and its people.
You know, folks, before I begin this, I went through the tapes that we've done on the Illuminati, and it's approaching 100 hours now. The first original series, Mystery Babylon, was 41 tapes. And it wasn't until today, you see, I didn't even realize it, because I just do the broadcast and I give Annie the tapes. I didn't even realize it, but the Luxor videotape is number 33 in the series. So somehow this mysteriously works out the way these people have planned it, I guess. And number 33 being a videotape, when the tapes are sent to whoever orders the series, we always get a letter from them or a postcard saying, number 33 was missing, just like the lost light, the lost word, and it's incredible. You see, there really is something to the way their magical system of numbers works. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, I'm just saying that there's something to it. And I'm not quite sure exactly what that is. But it's there, nonetheless. Those of you who have done the research and have began to peer in to the mysteries behind the veil, you've also written me letters and you've noticed some of the same things happening with you. And so I thought I would just mention that before getting into the meat of tonight's broadcast. I find it amazing that I've done close to 100 hours just on the Illuminati over the years. That's an awful lot. It's a lot of research, ladies and gentlemen. And not all of the research is mine. Most of it is, and I'm the only one that's ever put it all together and educated what they call the profane into the secrets of the order. Tonight, the Illuminati Exposed by R. Shand. He doesn't start as early in the history of man as I do in my research and in my expose of these people. However, he starts, and that's what's important. And where he starts, from that point forward, almost everything that he has discovered agrees exactly with the research that I have produced, with just some minor differences. And I think that's just because I've been at it for so many more years than anybody else. Robert Anton Wilson, in his book The Cosmic Trigger, wrote, Sufi historian Idries Shah traces the name of the Illuminati back to a verse in the Quran which mentions a shining star. And you can also see Patar and Judean Illuminator for ancient Egyptian and Judean connections to the Illuminati, and there are many. The term Illuminati, according to William T. Still in his book The New World Order, was used by one early writer, Menendez Pelayo, as early as 1492, and is attributable to a group known as the Alumbrados of Spain. The Alumbrados were said to receive secret knowledge from an unknown higher source, resulting in superior human intelligence. This group was condemned by an edict of the Grand Inquisition in 1623, and you all know what happens when that happens. People get barbecued, burned at the stake, tortured, put on the rack, bones broken in all the parts of their body, eyes burned out. Some writers claim that a group known as the Illuminated Ones was founded by Joachim of Flores in the 11th century and taught a primitive, supposedly Christian doctrine of poverty and equality. The 16th century saw the rise of a powerful society based upon a secret cult in the mountains of Afghanistan known as the Roshaniya, or Illuminated Ones. The earliest figure named in the history of the cult is one Bayazid Ansari of Afghanistan, whose family claimed descent from the Ansar, the helpers who assisted Muhammad after his flight from Mecca nearly 1400 years ago. And as a reward for this service, he stated his ancestors had been granted initiation into the mysteries of the Ishmaelite religion, the secret inner training which dated from Abraham's rebuilding of the temple at Mecca, the mystical Hiram. Not far from Peshawar, which is now in the northwest of Pakistan, Bayazid set up a small school where he carefully coached those who had been initiated by him in the knowledge of the supernatural that he claimed. A period of probation was expected from each candidate, during which he would go into periods of concealment or meditation, known as khilwat, or silence. During this time, he was to receive the illumination, which was emanated from the Supreme Being, who desired a class of perfect men and women to carry out the organization and direction of the world. Merchants and soldiers contributed lavishly to the chief's upkeep and his most expensive military, political, and espionage system. At this stage of success, Bayazid now preached that there was no afterlife of the kind currently believed in. No reward, no punishment, only a spirit state which was completely different from earthly life. The spirits, if they belonged to the order, can continue to enjoy themselves and be earthly powers, acting through living members. Eat, drink, and be merry. Gain power, look after yourself. You have no allegiance except to the order, he told them, and all humanity which cannot identify itself by our secret sign is our lawful prey. Oh, how many times have I told you that? 40 years after the last religio-military leader of the Afghan Illuminated Ones died, a society of the same name, known as the Illuminati, came into being in Germany, formed, it is said, by one Adam Weishaupt. And if you look into the meaning of the word Adam and Weishaupt, you'll find that the symbology and the hidden code is everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. Weishaupt was said to have been a young professor of canon law at Ingolstadt University. Coincidences of date and beliefs connect these Bavarian Illuminati with the Afghan ones and also with other cults which called themselves illumined. And for reference, you can look in Secret Societies by Arkan Darul. Adam Weishaupt was a
Strange duck indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Rather than obey the dictates of the real and adjust himself to his reduced limits, late 18th century man took refuge among phantoms, satisfying his nostalgia with the marvels offered by impostors and necromancers. He fled matter and denied its existence, and a whole culture began collapsing. Adam Weishaupt adopted the teachings of radical French philosophers such as Jean-Jacques Rousseau, 1712 to 1778, and the anti-Christian doctrines of the Manichaeans. He was indoctrinated in Egyptian occultism in 1771 by a merchant of unknown origin named Colmer, who was said to have traveled Europe in search of converts. Brilliant and well-trained by the Jesuits in the conspiratorial methods of access to power, young Weishaupt decided to organize a body of conspirators, determined to free the world from the Jesuitical rule of Rome and help humanity back to the pristine Christian faith of the Hermetic martyrs. He is reputed to have been initiated by a German merchant named Colmer. He had spent many years in Egypt into a secret doctrine based on Manichaeism. May Day of 1776, Weishaupt founded his own sect of the very perfectibles, better known as the Illuminati, with 5 original members self-described as reformist libertarians, partisans of absolute equality. And that you can find in The Magic of Obelisks by Peter Tompkins. And while we're here on the subject of the training that Adam Weishaupt received from the Jesuits, ladies and gentlemen, it is incredible that people would believe that Adam Weishaupt, who was in fact a Jesuit priest, would divorce himself from his original order and form something called the Illuminati in order to get even with the Jesuits and to break their power, because, ladies and gentlemen, the Jesuits came out of the Illuminati themselves. Remember the reference to the Alumbrados of Spain? Well, Ignatius Loyola, ladies and gentlemen, who was the first general of the Jesuits, sometimes referred to as the Black Pope, was a member, in fact, the leader of the Alumbrados in Spain. He was the leader of the Spanish Illuminati. He was arrested by the Inquisition. He was in the process of being interrogated just prior to the torture phase when he used his influence through his brothers of the Illuminati to gain an audience with the Pope. He entered the chambers of the Pope crawling on his hands and knees, ladies and gentlemen, and when he emerged, he was the general of a new order called the Society of Jesus, and some say had as much or more power than the Pope, or as the Pope, as the case may be. And that was the birth of the society known as the Jesuits. You can see them practicing their subversion around the world now as they teach Marxist liberation theology in third world nations. And so it goes on and on and on. So those of you who believe that Adam Weishaupt began his branch of the Bavarian Illuminati to get even with the Jesuits, you still haven't done all the research that you need to do, ladies and gentlemen, because that is not the case. Never was the case, never could be the case, for they are the same order. Adam Weishaupt, now I'm continuing. One of the things that you'll notice when you research the Illuminati and the secret orders, when you're reading the books of others who have written about these orders and these people, is that they don't take them seriously at all. They refer to their rites of initiation and their ceremonies as mumbo-jumbo and the like. In fact, it is not. It is a very, very complicated secret religion based upon the journey of the soul, and it is the same religion that has existed throughout the history of humanity, practiced in the secret orders of all of the major societies of the world, in particular the upper or nobility class, the people who had knowledge and educations and ruled the countries of the world. And here's an example from Peter Partner in The Murdered Magicians. He's also the one who talks quite elaborately about conspiracy theories. The aristocratic mumbo-jumbo of the Templar lodges pandered to the confused conservatism of the German nobles and had a great deal in common with the mumbo-jumbo of the Rosicrucians, to whose ideas the Illuminati were absolutely opposed. The Bavarian Illuminati were an austere emanation of the spirit of the German professor, inspired by a consciously bourgeois program, irreligious and radical. And here you can see that Peter Partner did not take Adam Weishaupt seriously either, who said that his order would exist under many different names and occupations, always appearing to oppose each other, but at the highest levels of these orders they were of the same body and of the same mind. The ceremonies of the Illuminati were divided into three principal classes, and those into degrees as follows, as far as we have been able to determine. But remember, this is a secret order. There could be many, many more, and probably are. But this is what we were able to discover. It's what our Shand discovered. Anybody who researches the Illuminati will find the same thing. The first degree was the nursery, preparatory literary essay, novitiate, minerval, minor illuminatus, and magistratus are the degrees. In the nursery there are 5 degrees. And in the second class, called symbolic Freemasonry, there are 4 degrees: the apprentice, the fellow craft, the master mason, and A, Scots Major Illuminatus, and B, Scots Illuminatus Dirigens, or Directory. And in the third class, called the Mysteries, there are 2 degrees divided into sections. The first degree is the lesser, with holding A, presbyter priest or epopt, B, prince or regent, and the second degree is the greater, holding the magus, or B, the rex or king. Some of these latter degrees were never completed, they say. However, when I prowl the internet and I find people signing their name with Fraternitas Rex Mundi, ladies and gentlemen, I know that that is not a true statement. And that's from Coyle's Masonic Encyclopedia, by the way, if you'd like to look that up for yourself. Here is something that was sent to our Shand by Jeff Jorzak. And he says, status as a Mason was not required for initiation into the Order of Illuminati, since the 4th, 5th, and 6th degrees of Weishaupt and Baron von Nogi's system practically duplicated the 3 degrees of symbolic Freemasonry. Although Nagy claimed to have a system of 10 degrees, the last 2 appear never to have been fully worked up. Again, that's as far as we're able to find. In The Gods of Eden by William Bramley, which is questionable, highly questionable, any of the stuff that you read in there, although he did do some legitimate research into the secret societies, he claims that all of the secret societies are headed and guided by extraterrestrials from some other planet. And ladies and gentlemen, that just flat ain't true. But William Bramley says The Gods of Eden, openly political and anti-monarchical, Weishaupt's Illuminati formed another channel of higher degrees for Freemasons to graduate into after completing the blue degrees. Weishaupt's Illuminati had its own hidden master known as the Ancient Scot Superior. And you can find a link right to that place, ladies and gentlemen, on my website. And I don't mean William Bramley's Gods of Eden, I mean the Ancient Scot Superior. According to Archon Darul in secret societies, in the lower ranks, the nursery, the member was very much in the dark as to the way in which the order was run and how it should accomplish its design of freeing the world. As he progressed, however, he found that a part of his service to the society was to gain financial and social power and to place them at the disposal of the group. He was expected to be a diligent Mason and to try to gain control over Masonic funds. It was not until the 10th rite of promotion had been completed that the member was given, with the grade of priest, certain definite knowledge. This included the fact that the Illuminati were proposing to destroy princes and prelates throughout the world, and were to remove forever the feeling of local nationality from the minds of men. The ways in which this was to be done involved infiltrating high positions in education, administration, and the press. The very highest degrees showed that the rationalism and materialism of the thinkers who developed it were determined to stamp out all beliefs in religion, God, and any faith in a deity. The initiate was told were humans' inventions and had no real meaning. Subsequently, this was developed further, and the member who arrived at the highest position, that of Rex King, or King of the World, Rex Mundi, learned that he was now equal to a king, and that all men were capable of equal advancement. Hence, the need for kings over ordinary mortals was an illusion. And folks, what I just read to you right there, I mean, if you look around it today, if you can't see the hand of the Illuminati at work, then you can't see. We'll follow the threads of conspiracy, if you will. After their recent exposures in Bavaria, the Illuminati had been driven even further underground, taking on a variety of names, such as the French Revolutionary Club. And as radicals flocked into these new varieties of Illuminism, a larger meeting hall was needed. The hall of the Jacobins convent was leased, and it was from this hall that they eventually derived their new name, the Jacobin Club. And the Jacobin Club was very active in the early days of the United States of America. The Jacobin Club met in secret and eventually boasted of having some of the best educated and most influential men in France among its 1,300 members. The Jacobins vowed to destroy the monarchy as well as other existing institutions and sought to establish what they called a new world order, or universal republic. That's what's coming, and these are the people who are bringing it. And they did destroy the monarchy, ladies and gentlemen, and they are at work in England right now to destroy that monarchy. And by golly, it won't be long until the House of Windsor falls. They can't even any longer handle their own family, much less a nation. And the Illuminati, in control of the press and the other institutions, are hammering at them constantly, all the time. And the people, well, the people love their monarch, they say, but they hate the monarchy. How about that? The famous magician and occultist Cagliostro was initiated into the Illuminati in 1783. Many years later, he told Catholic priests about his initiation. The initiation took place in an underground room near Frankfurt, Germany. An iron box filled with papers was opened. The introducers took from it a manuscript book, which on the first page read, "We, Grand Masters of the Templars," then followed a form of oath traced in blood. The book stated that Illuminism was a conspiracy directed against thrones and altars, and that the first blows were to attain France, and that after the fall of the French monarchy, Rome must be attacked. By March 1789, the 266 lodges controlled by the French Grand Orient were all Illuminized, without knowing it. For the Freemasons in general were not told the name of the sect that brought them these mysteries, and only a very small number were really initiated into the secret, those at the highest of the pyramidal structure of initiation. And in the following month, the revolution broke out. That from Nesta H. Webster's Secret Societies and Subversive Movements. Cagliostro was the agent of the Templars, and therefore wrote to the Freemasons of London that the time had come to begin the work of rebuilding the Temple of the Eternal. He had introduced into Masonry a new rite called the Egyptian, and endeavored to resuscitate the mysterious worship of Isis. The three letters IPD on his seal were the initials of the word Lilia pedibus destru, tread underfoot the lilies. And of course, the lilies were the representation of France. And a Masonic medal of the 16th or 17th century has upon it a sword cutting off the stalk of a lily, and the words Talum dabit altio messum. And that translates, such harvest revenge will give, and you can find that in Morals and Dogma by General Albert Pike. In The Assassins, Holy Killers of Islam by Edward Berman, I quote, in his memoirs pour survivre l'histoire du Jacobinisme, published in 3 volumes from 1797 to 1798, Barruel, a Jesuit scholar, derived all evils from the Mani and the Manicheans and demonstrated the existence of a continuous historical conspiracy. From Peter Partner and the Murdered Magicians, the Templars and their myth, in the minds of Barruel and Cadet de Gassicourt, Le Tombeau de Jacques de Molay, there was an